22 years of alcohol and drug addiction. It started out marijuana and cigarettes, to believe it or not. And then from there it graduated to alcohol. I was a blackout drinker right away. And I figured out that I wasn't going to be able to get through life in a blackout. And one thing after another led to another, and I switched to methamphetamine, cocaine and methamphetamine. I come from a really good family. Mom and Dad were married for 21 years. I was 17 and they went through a divorce. And from that point forward, things were already spiraling into my teenage years. But from that day forward, it's like nobody was watching. And so I just started trying to make my own way from there, and it did not work out well. It began hanging out with friends. It began subtle. When I tell you drug addiction is so subtle, it was really subtle. It was just hanging out with friends, doing what my friends were doing, looking for some place to be that was my own decision and not somebody else's. By the time I was 22, I was completely strung out. I never knew about recovery. I didn't know that there was another way of life. I thought that everybody everywhere had some kind of vice, like a rite of passage of being an adult and getting to make your own choices and do your own things. My first husband and their family and the way they lived, and for lack of knowing how I was going to be self-supporting with my children on my own. I didn't know which way to go. I didn't know, I wasn't aware of services that were available. My older sister tried to show me, you know, how to get on aid and how to, that at that time it was paper food stamps, and Medi-Cal would help you have your children and you could find a life because they're going to give you help and you're going to move forward with that. Well, I didn't have what it took inside of me to know that I was worthy. So fear kept me there. All kinds of fear kept me there. I tried several times geographically to move and to change it. I got a divorce, I moved to Utah, and I met a really good man there and had 2 kids with him, and he was a really good provider. He gave us like the roof over our head. He was good to the kids. He lined up, I didn't. There was still something inside of me broke, and so because water seeps to its own level, I was able to find more drugs and more alcohol and more things. Everywhere I went, it was there. I went to him, and he thought I was cheating on him, and essentially I was, because I was escaping to do drugs, and he wasn't a drug addict. He understood the drinking. He didn't understand the drug addiction. He had no experience with it, and when I came to him and I told him, because the fights were really getting bad, they were escalating, and I was hiding something huge, and he knew that I was hiding something huge. He thought it was an affair. It was my first love. It was drugs and alcohol, and so I told him that I had a drug problem. I pulled out my stash of paraphernalia and told him, I don't know what to do. I can't fix it. I'm broken. And I told him I felt worse than a person with cancer, because even if you have cancer, people notice it and they throw you into places that will help you. I don't know what to do. And he put me in a program back then. It was in the 80s, and it was called the Odyssey House in Salt Lake City. And it was an interesting journey. So I just didn't trust the process. And I had all the kids at home, and I worried more about what they were doing instead of what I should be doing. I was 26 years old at that time, and I stayed for a couple of months and just could not make it work, could not pull it together. And I think when the student's ready, the teacher appears, number one, but I also think that as ready as I was, the disease was bigger than me. I left there, went home way too soon. I fell apart, and I felt like I'd missed my only ship above, like it had sailed, and the window of opportunity had closed. I was constantly doing everything wrong. Yeah.
So what?
There's a lot of self-loathing. Many years go by, and I put myself in a program in Modesto Union Gospel Mission, and I stayed there for 18 months, and I did really well there. And I thought that I got my high school diploma there in 1997. I figured out how to communicate a little bit clearer with other people, and I figured out that I was worth something. Something was missing there because it was all God. It was all God-based. It was all faith-based. There were no outside meetings. You'd have to know my belief system. So I believe in the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, especially. Yeah, and so I prayed about all the things that were bothering me, but I did not know how to discard those things. I carried it with me for many, many years. I was able to get out of there, and I stayed sober, and I thought when I changed, the world changed with me. So when I left and I found me again, there I was. From there, I went on a 7-year binge that killed me. And it didn't kill me, it killed my mother. And my mom died in my arms in March of 2002. Things were spiraling. I was grieving so bad that there wasn't a drink, there wasn't a drug, there wasn't anything that could take me there anymore. There was no route of escape. It was Mother's Day 2005, and I didn't get invited to a Mother's Day party where all my kids and my sister and their kids were. They were barbecuing and drinking, and they thought I didn't want to be around that. And I got angry, and I was alone, and I didn't pick up the phone, and I took off, and I went over there, and I drank. And I decided I thought I could drink like a normal man, that my only problem was probably just drugs. Within 2 weeks, I drank my rent money. I was at a drug house, and everybody was doing drugs, and there was some girl there that had paroled, and I'd never been to prison, so I wasn't sure exactly what she was saying, but she said, "Today's the last day. Today's my last day." And I said, "Last day for what?" She says, "This is the last day I'm getting high." I said, "How do you know that?" And she said, "Because I have a gatekeeper, and a gatekeeper's finding me a bed, and I have a bed tomorrow." I said, "A bed for where?" And she said, "They're putting me in a recovery home." I said, "Who are they? Who are they?" And she said, and I told her, "I wish I was on parole so I could do that." I always say I came from Ming and Union with a duffel bag and a 7-year-old. That one over there. And a black eye, because that's how terrible. Life was just terrible. And I asked her, I told her, I wish I was on parole. I wish I could just, I thought if they locked me up for a little while that at least I would be somewhere where I could explain to my kids why I was such a failure. And she said, "You don't have to be locked up. You can go downtown to the courthouse on the 4th floor, and there's a gatekeeper there." In my mind, it's animated. I've got kids, so I'm seeing pearly gates open right up. And I said, "Well, how do I do it?" And she says, "You just go down there and tell them you need help. And when they ask you questions, tell the truth." What a concept, to tell the truth. It is. And it took me probably 3 days to find my way to the gatekeeper downtown. Somebody called and needed a ride out of jail, and I said I would give her a ride. And does she know where the gatekeeper is? And she says, "Everybody knows about the gatekeeper." And they did an assessment on there. They put me at a level 3, level 4 drug addiction, or a drug addict, which I didn't know really what that meant, but they really did me a favor because they opened the door for me to get a bed. And I did a 45-day program at the Capistrano. And I claimed the sobriety date of December 13th, 2002. when I got in there was some things that I did. I was desperate. I wanted to be a better person. I knew somebody was in there. I just didn't know how much of her was gone. Irrevocably gone, because I was so mad at God and life and you and everybody. People were so cruel, and I was one of those, and I knew that. And when I got in there was a counselor. Her name was Stephanie, and she told me this is how it's going to be, and she lined everything up for me. And there was like a 10-day blackout, but then everything started happening real fast. She sent me to grief and loss. She worked on grief and loss counseling with me, with my mother, and she handed me the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they sent me to Narcotics Anonymous groups, and we processed a lot of how are you feeling today, where somebody actually listened and cared. And out of desperation, I got the book and I got to work. And within that 45 days, I was looking for somebody to help me with my 4th and 5th step. And they said, you need to get a sponsor. And what a huge fear that is, to get somebody that cares about your life just as much as you do, and it can be a complete stranger and it still works. And then they had me journaling 3 positive affirmations a day, just something good about my life every day. And they retrained my thinking. For everything that was being taken out, there was positives being fed back in immediately. And it was like the faucet turned on and it never shut off for me, of knowledge and wisdom and freedom. And I understand how sick I was at the time that I went in there too. And I knew too that I was up against time. With my kids had gotten older, and so at this time, all these years later, my children were older, and the gap had been bridged between the circular program and the religious program. It twined together perfectly for me at that time. That's my story, and I think that recovery is for everyone. It gave me hope that I knew my children, some of my kids were already taking the path that I had chosen. Our kids do learn what we live. And I thought if this could work for me, it could work for anybody, including my kids, and maybe somebody would be here for my kids if I did this today for myself and for others. And it panned out bigger than I anticipated it would, ever. I remember waking up one morning. I had drank that night and I was too drunk to drive, and I woke up that morning and I thought, wow, if I just do a line of crank, I'll sober up and I can drive. Red flags, the program hit so fast in my head. The red flags popped up everywhere. What do you mean you'll be sober enough to drive? That's not sober. So finally, for the first time in my life, I knew the difference between what sober was and what sober wasn't. And the program worked. And when I worked through that and I went back through what happened, what I had learned is I couldn't adhere to the principles. I couldn't follow my own rules. And my own rules became the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's the principles that I live by today, and thank God, And so working with a sponsor, she was an awesome thing. She was a great tool. She told me, you need to go to an NA meeting and call me when you're done. And I told her, I don't like NA, I like AA. She says, I know, you need to go to an NA meeting. I told her, but I drank, I didn't do drugs. She says, I know, but you need to go. And through the process of that, I would call her and tell her, this is what I heard. No, you need to go to another one. She'd hang up. I got good and mad at her, and about the 6th one, I called her and I told her alcohol is a drug, period. She says, you can choose any meeting you want now. She taught me I didn't have to be anything higher than human, that we all make mistakes, that it's progress, not perfection. And she says, so you can pick up the pieces from where you stand today, and you never have to go back. It's up to you. And so I learned a really good lesson that year. So I have 2 sobriety dates from drugs. It's December 13th, 2002, and from alcohol, I take my Alcoholics Anonymous chip is October 13th, 2005, because I wasn't able to adhere to the principles, follow my own rules. Let go and let God. Tell somebody. I believe that if you expose it, it loses its power. Stop hiding. I believe in recovery. I believe in the process. So much love in this world that I didn't know existed. There's so much support in this world that I didn't know existed. My mom used to say something to me that I didn't understand at the time. She said a couple of things. One thing she said to me was, when things are at their worst, you're at your best. And that was really painful for me, because I didn't want to be at my best when things were at their worst. I wanted to be at my best always. But what it taught me was that when things are at their worst, that's when I get motivated to make changes. The answer for me came in a really strange place. I would not wish anybody in that house that I was in the day that somebody told me there was a gatekeeper and there was a Capistrano and there were several. You know, when I went to that gatekeeper and they rattled off how many recovery homes there were in Bakersfield, you know, I had no idea when they, that they even existed. When they rattled off how many facilities such as this one here, behavioral health clinics and everywhere that is open. Go to your primary care and tell them I've got a problem. Go to the emergency room and tell them I really want help. How do I get help? Start at the Mary Kay Shell Center, start at the behavioral health clinic, start anywhere, but make that change, you know. I think that today I tell my kids, I can't fix you, but I can show you what works for me.